Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Critical Conversations. I'm your host, Karissa Dean. I wanted to thank you all first for being here with us today. I have brought someone on the show that is hopefully going to spike some curiosity for you, for your partner, for your lifestyle. And I'm really excited to dig into this conversation with Lauren Hayes, who is going to be poking some feathers, I'm sure, for some of you. So I'm going to ask you to buckle up, ride along, open your mind, get curious. Lauren, I'm going to toss it over to you. Give us a little introduction about who you are and what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, awesome. So I am Lauren Hayes, and I am a relationship coach, and I serve the community, the ethical non-monogamous community. So we'll get into this in a second, but this includes polyamorous to people who are swinging. I've been married for 19 years. I've been swinging for just over 6. And this has really been like the personal growth journey of both my and my husband's lifetime. And so I'm coming out with a book in December, which highlights these 7 life and love lessons that I've learned through non monogamy.
I love
And
this.
these are universal lessons, by the way. You do not have to be interested in non-monogamy or want to do it or have to do it. That's why I wrote the book, so people can get the lessons without being non-monogamous. But yeah, it's always an interesting conversation.
Definitely. I'm excited for this conversation. We have friends who are swingers, and I have a really good friend who practices polyamory. And it's super interesting to me because I think the initial like eye roll or like gasp that people get when they're introduced to these different types of lifestyles, it must be hard as somebody who practices it to kind of have those reactions. So I kind of want to start there and be like, I'm somebody who knows nothing about these worlds. Let's just pretend.
Yeah.
What are you telling people when they have that initial reaction to your lifestyle choice?
So my husband and I are swingers, and we don't share this with everyone. I don't know many swingers who do.
Yeah.
I think there's a distinction. So, just for people who don't know, within the umbrella of ethical non monogamy, there's polyamory on one end, which is we're in it for love and romantic and emotionally committed relationships. And then I say the other end, I don't know if these are spectrums, but we are in it for friendship and sexual adventure is what I like to say. So then there's everything in between, because when you're non-monogamous, you're creating your own version of anything. And people actually really don't like to label themselves very much in the E&M community. But so I would say polyamorous community is getting a little bit more traction in terms of a little more acceptance in the mainstream, a lot more about them in the media. In fact, a lot of people will think that E&M, ethical non-monogamy, and polyamory are the same thing. But how people are practicing underneath that umbrella term can be very different. And it's great that the polyamorous community is leading that, but I don't feel like swingers feel comfortable yet really sharing that aspect. My theory around that is because polyamory can really fall into the like love is love narrative that the LGBTQ community has had, whereas in the swinging community, we're like, yeah, we're friends. We're not in this for love.
Yeah.
So it's a little different. So choosing to tell people, most people will, if they, when you first get into it, you don't tell anybody because you don't even know what you're doing. You don't know if you're going to identify with this, if you're going to stay in it. It's all just like a big, experiment. Then as people become more identified with it, and I'm talking about swingers in particular right now, they will usually start sharing with different people in their lives, because ultimately you end up having to lie or keep secrets or withhold information about your life, which is not really very fair to some of those friendships. Sure. And you also get to a point where you're like, well, if they're not going to be my friend because of this, then I guess we're not friends. But personally, I haven't lost any friends yet
Great.
over revealing this. And, there are professional considerations and all schools and kids and all the
Yeah,
things that are still big reasons why people are secretive to one degree or another.
definitely. It's interesting, you bring up relationships, and I think anytime anyone like is choosing a new way of lifestyle, you run the risk of leaving friendships behind
Mm-hmm.
because people don't necessarily like change, especially change that is confronting and or challenging a societal norm. um I'm entering this conversation as totally open minded. I really believe in a world where we get to choose how we want to show up and be our authentic selves. And I believe that if being in this ENM world suits you and makes you feel alive and wants and makes you want to participate in life, I say go for it. So I come to
Right.
the table of this conversation being really open minded. I want you to tell me what it was for you and your husband, because I think the curiosity of a lot of listeners right now is, I don't understand how she's married for 19 years and then just 6 years ago they decided to
Yeah.
participate. So what was that transition? What happened?
Yeah. So first of all, that's super common, is that couples who have been married for a while will become curious about it. And I have a couple reasons for that I'll get into in a second. But for us, it was twofold. So when we had younger kids, and so I got hit on by a polyamorous guy, like a friend of a friend. And he was like, "Are you guys polyamorous? Because I'm getting that vibe." And we were like, "Oh, no, but tell us more," because we were just super interested, like fascinated, not interested in doing it, just
Sure.
fascinated by it. That whole episode, while we weren't considering it, really created a spark in our relationship for like a week or two, where the sex was just hotter, and we were like, because someone hit on me and it was like somebody else wanted me, and there was this just energy to it. And he didn't feel threatened, and nor were we interested. So fast forward a bunch of years, and then he just randomly brought up, I feel like there's something more. And I was really caught off guard. And I went to all the places that a person goes, like, "I'm not enough. Are we not happy? Like, I thought we were happy," like all these things. He's like, "No, no, no, we are." And I asked, "Do you want a girlfriend?" Because polyamory was really the only model that we knew of, I would say. And he's like, "No, I don't. I don't really even know what I mean by that." Which was a great way to approach me with it. And this is something I recommend to people now. Had he known everything about it, and like, "Hey, I looked into it, and here's all the things we can do, and here's where we can go, and da, 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 and do you want to do it?" I think that would have been way worse.
Yeah.
So that became our exploration together out of that conversation. And it was awkward and bumbly for a little while and full of emotion. But eventually we found the book called The Ethical Slut that helped us a lot to define sort of the E&M world, what was out there, what the options were. And then we just went through that book every week together during our date nights and talked about what was interesting and what was not. And we both were attracted to the swinging model, and started taking little baby steps towards that direction, and then really took to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. How old were your kids at the time? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so our kids were 10 and 12 at the time. They are now, I guess we can all do the math, they are 16 and 18. And we actually told them recently, because with the book coming out at the end of this year and stuff, we just wanted to. And also, it goes back to that, you know, you're not lying to your kids, because you don't talk about your sex life to your kids in general
Right.
anyway. But there is a lot of just withholding information. And so our son actually suspected and asked us. And so then we were open about it. And it was really crazy timing, because we had already planned on telling them. But it was a great conversation. And my daughter actually said, "I was a little offended that you didn't tell us sooner."
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Of course she
I mean,
would.
I have very mature children, but
Yeah.
also, but there is something to that. It's
Yeah.
like we don't need to know the details, but we just want to know who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that started to feel a little weird for us too, because we believe that E&M should be an option for people, and we weren't really even talking about it with our children.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's a taboo thing.
Yeah.
I'll say it because I think it is a taboo thing, because it's not something people do talk about, which is the whole premise of this show, is bringing on people,
Yes.
having conversations that we don't normally have, and understanding that just because you participate in something that I don't participate in, there's no good or bad in that. And I think I saw something you posted on Instagram where and you just mentioned it here, where when your husband first came to you with it, he hadn't done all the dirty research himself. It was something that you explored together. And whatever on Instagram I watched, it was about having that conversation together and exploring together. And I think you mentioned listening to a recent podcast episode of mine where I talked about relationships and connection. We don't talk about sex as a culture, as a society.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's taboo, even if you're in a monogamous male to female relationship. You don't always necessarily talk about sex, but sex can be so fucking magical if you talk about it with your partner, and it can be more fulfilling and it can be more fun. And so I do actually think that we should explore the topic together. And I think that's where the taboo comes in to these different lifestyles, is there's the assumption that one partner isn't in it, or, you know, one partner pushed the other partner. And so it's fascinating. It's really lovely to hear you say that your husband approached you and you explored it together. I think there is such beauty in that choice together.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many misconceptions, which is not the main purpose of the book. The main purpose of the book is actually these 7 life lessons. But within learning these with me, you also learn about the community. And almost all these conversations that I have, I've been on lots of other podcasts recently, people's minds are just like, whoa, this is so different than what I thought it was. And I think that's also why it's so taboo, because what is taboo is not even what it is.
Yeah.
But you are correct about talking about sex in general is difficult for people, which I would love to change that so much, because it has nothing to do with who you're having sex with. It just is about having the best sex of your life, and being in touch with that part of you, because that is a part of all of us. And I know there are asexual, it's a different level and a different version of each of us in each of us. That's the beautiful thing about each of us. We're all unique, but it is a part to one degree or another of us. And when we don't explore that side, it's literally like part of us that's just over there dormant. And when that part gets woken up, it can be really beautiful.
It can be. And I think that's the piece of life that's missing. I mean, that's where we're seeing so much anger, so much frustration, so much depression, so much anxiety, is because people aren't allowing the fullest expression of themselves to come through. And I think a lot of that could be in the realm of sexual desires, fantasies, just good sex in general. I mean, I cannot even tell you how many conversations I've had with friends, girlfriends, people over my lifetime, and just being like, wait, you've never really had an orgasm? You've never really, you've never told your partner what you wanted? Like, that's mind blowing to me, because it's so important, to be in that vulnerable act with another person and not feel like you can communicate what you need or what you want.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop there. When you start practicing what you want in an intimate relationship in the bedroom, your voice starts to get used in other parts of your life, and you start to ask for what you want in other areas of your life, and have boundaries in other areas of your life, and just, self-express more in general.
Exactly. I love it. So talk to me tell me and tell the listeners, I think I know what ethical non-monogamy is, but tell me why ethical exists in the ENM.
Yes. So another term for it is consensual non-monogamy. Also, some people just refer to it as open relationship. But ethical non-monogamy in particular, and when we're in this lifestyle or in the business especially, we just drop the ethical part. We just say non-monogamy, because ethical is the part that defines that it's all consensual and everybody knows about it. So we already have terms for unethical monogamy, which is cheating and affairs and whatever.
Yeah.
So when we say non-monogamy, the consensual and the ethical part is implied. So that's what you'll hear that dropped often. But that is what the E is very important for when learning about it and distinguishing it from monogamy.
Yeah. What I have I'm trying to think about how I want to phrase this, because I don't want to offend anyone, but I've known people who've cheated. Are those people cheating because they are not expressing themselves?
I mean, I think there's so many reasons that people cheat that we couldn't possibly answer that question. But I do think that cheating doesn't mean you're unfulfilled. It might mean you mean unfulfilled sexually. It might mean you're unfulfilled in some other way in your relationship. Yeah. A lot of affairs happen because of, start as emotional affairs. And some, there's great disagreement whether an emotional affair is an affair or it's worse than a physical affair. Yeah. So there's going to be an indication to some extent of there being something wrong with the relationship. Now, I think some people cheat because they're not wired for monogamy.
Right.
And so they might feel perfectly fulfilled in their current relationship. And also, they don't feel like that's something that they can explore, or it's something that they've learned about themselves while they're in their relationship and they're too afraid to bring it up to their partner, or all kinds of reasons. I mean, we could talk for days probably about reasons people
yeah
affairs.
And I think that's kind of where my mind was going. Is it some people are not, like, in your research, in your exploration that you did, were you finding that the inability to communicate is kind of what sparked people's curiosity in these different lifestyles? I mean, like,
oh, okay.
Do you see where I'm going with it? I don't know how to say it, but there
are a lot of things that spark the curiosity. And also the thing that I'm hearing in there a little bit is when people are considering for real non-monogamy, like not just cheating, but when they're really considering it, you really better feel like you are in a great relationship already. That is probably one of the biggest, I'm going to say that about every misconception, one of the biggest misconceptions, but I do think that one is a huge one, and that there's an implication if you're interested in non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy, then you are unfulfilled in your current relationship. You are less committed in your current relationship. You're looking for something else. I'm just going to say that is not at all, that you're not. You might be looking to add something to your current relationship, whether that's sexual adventure, or another reason people will get into it is because one or the other has a bisexuality element to them that they want to investigate. Or if you start talking about polyamory, yes, they want other loving relationships, but your current relationship will only survive if you're doing it to add to your current relationship and not to fix something in your current relationship. Because you're also inviting in, as people know and can imagine, a tremendous amount of complexity. So if your relationship is not in a healthy place to go do that, it will probably speed up any problems that you had in your relationship. And that's why E&M can get a bad rap, because I think a lot of people know that couple that, like, oh, they were having trouble and then they went to try E&M as a last ditch effort, which is like the worst idea. And then they're like, and then they blame E&M for the demise of that relationship. So
Yeah.
that's just something to always ask. And, you know, when we talked about that people don't talk about sex, you know what else they don't really talk about? Relationships.
Oh, yeah.
So that is this E&M conversation is the convergence of those things, because we all have issues, and no one of us have a perfect relationship, or we could say we all have a perfect relationship because a perfect relationship doesn't
Sure.
exist. But we're not talking about those things. You know how many times you get into a conversation with girlfriends and someone's so relieved because they're like, "Oh my God, you have that problem too?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we all think there's something wrong with us, or something wrong
Right.
with our relationships or something.
Yeah.
And so that makes us even more scared to talk about it. So when I say often that we grew up in monogamy, we did, but we were not taught monogamy. We were not taught how to do monogamy well. And
No.
and this is part of it. Is like
Yes.
not only talking to our friends about our relationships, we don't even talk to each other about our relationships because we're so afraid of losing our partner oftentimes. So, and I know you're a fan of the Gottman work. And so my relationship training is Gottman also. And people are surprised by this because it's for monogamous relationships.
Right.
But this is one of the things that I talk about all the time. A healthy relationship is a healthy relationship. The Gottmans know what a healthy relationship is. So it's not that our relationships are different than monogamous. They are all the same, and the same things make them healthy. The difference is that in non-monogamy, we have to be operating at a very healthy level in order to invite the complexity in that we do.
Right.
And then, even then, you can feel like you have the best relationship on the planet. The stressors or the complexity of non-monogamy is going to shine a light on any area in your relationship that maybe was less healthy, but you could kind of work around it.
Sure. Yeah.
When you're monogamous. In non-monogamy, that is a constant practice for us, that something gets shown on our relationship, we acknowledge that, and then we fix that piece. And so that I often equate it to taking our relationships to the gym. So like in monogamy, so not even in monogamy, as humans, we always take kind of the easiest path around things. That's how our brains are wired. So if there's a little rift in our relationship and we can just work around it, then we will continue to work around it.
Yep. Yep.
And that might be fine. It may cause more problems later. It may not. Whatever works for people, right? But if you take your relationship to the gym and the trainer takes one look at you and is like, "Oh, you haven't been doing squats." You're like, "Oh, yeah, because I hate squats." Well, you have to do squats if you want to be truly in shape. So that is kind of my analogy to we have the same. What makes up these healthy relationships is the same. It's just that we're working on it more often. I would say we're forced to see it more often. And so when people say about non-monogamy that we are less committed than other couples, it really
rubs you the wrong way.
Rubs us the wrong way, because we would argue that we're possibly more committed, because it is this constant exercise of recognizing these cracks or what's not working, constantly working to fix them.
Yeah. Constantly checking in. How are you? Are you okay with this? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. I can see how, to make it sustainable, you guys have to be more vulnerable and direct in your communication, because otherwise that is the recipe for disaster, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I think, you know, the reason I love John and Julie Gottman is because that's kind of their method, right? Is like more directness to, are you actually noticing your partner? And if you're not, you are avoiding your partner. And I absolutely applaud you and your partner and the people who are participating in this, because I think that there's so many broken relationships because there's a lack of communication. There's a lack of vulnerability. We feel embarrassed to say, "Hey, I need this," or "Hey, I have this weird desire." I actually recorded, I think her episode will come out before this episode. So her name was Artisma. I always say it wrong. It's Artisma, and she is a sexual fantasy. I don't remember if she calls herself a coach or, but she basically, speaks to unlocking your sexual fantasy through understanding why it showed up. So like if you have, X fantasy, it could be that you have Y desire and or unhealed trauma. And it's not necessarily that you want to do the thing that you had a dream about or whatever, but that there's an underlying theme. And if you can take the time to understand the theme, you can unlock a level of desire. And it was a really interesting conversation. And what I think I gained from that and why I'm bringing it up with you, Lauren, is because, again, it's this taboo thing that we don't talk about, but actually has the power for us to live a more authentic life. So in your last 6 years, what's shown up for you as far as really owning who you are? I love that you talked about, you're gaining a voice, you're gaining boundaries, you're gaining values, you're changing beliefs. So tell me a little bit about how this has unlocked a new level of Lauren.
Yeah, I will do that. And how I'll do that is I'll structure it through the chapters of my book, because
Perfect.
That is the 7 life and love lessons. And before I do that, I just want to say one other thing, which I think what is difficult for people in the monogamous world to understand is they can certainly understand the level of complexity that we're inviting in and and all those things, but the why would you be taking your relationship to the gym in such a way? Yeah. Well, because of the community. So what I often say is, for swinging in particular, is people will come for the sex and stay for the community. What people don't realize is how many people are in this community not even having sex with other people. It's a very open-minded, sex positive, body positive environment. And we just have so much fun. Like you were talking about in your podcast about going out with your partner and connecting with other people and all these things. We do that every week. Yeah. I mean, so it is a lifestyle, and something that we call it is the lifestyle. This is something that a term that swingers use versus polyamorous. But and then, like I said, there's crossover between the communities. So as you get into other areas of polyamory, it's a different type of lifestyle. They're choosing multiple romantic relationships versus, maybe this scene, but that's their why, because all of what they're gaining with these other people and these other relationships. So I just wanted to make that clear that that's why we're doing this, because there's a lot of payoff. Okay.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, so the first chapter you'll love is called Create Your Own Damn Life.
Yeah, baby. I'm here for that.
I know you are. Yeah, I know you are. Okay, so I don't think we have to say a lot about that, but it is about questioning how we grew up, looking at those areas of life that don't feel fulfilling to us and saying, are there other options in all areas, where you live, what your job is, like all the things. And really, getting true to yourself. And when you're in relationship, talking about all these things, and we don't always get what we want in life, but you're not going to get it if you never think about it or talk about it or try. Okay. Right. The second chapter is called Connection, 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 and Fun. This is exactly what I was just talking about, connecting with your partner, but also connecting with other people. We are human beings. We love to connect.
We do.
And we connect with people on all different levels. Non-monogamy operates in a space that is confusing for our culture, because we have friend, maybe best friend, or acquaintance friend, best friend, relationship. Yeah. We have these to define our relationships. We operate in the space of, there's a lot of connection that can happen between, hi, how are you? And I'm in love with you. And this is where we operate. And in fact, some people will be having sexual encounters. So this mixing of sex and friendship is another thing that is confusing for our culture, but it can be a thing. And I say it's confusing for our culture, and we also do have a culture of casual sex. So I'm not sure why once we're, it's just that once we're married, we're not supposed to want that anymore. So,
Yeah, exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
So that is the connection piece. And this is why I'm saying these are lessons for everybody, not non-monogamous.
Right.
Like, just go out, have date night, connect with other couples. Like watching your partner, and I'm not talking about in a sexual or flirty way, just watching your partner at dinner, talking with couples that you haven't met. How many times do things come up that you're like, God, I never heard that story before? Or you do that at work? I didn't even know you do that. I mean, so it's that unknowing your partner in these situations. It's beautiful. Okay.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I have to stop you and just interject and say that is something I think that my husband does so well. And there is this attraction I have for those moments because it sparks curiosity about something that we may have not gotten to had he not been like, hey, how are you guys? What are you up to? And invited a new set of conversation into our date night or whatever. So yes, I love that. I'm 100% there for it. Okay, chapter 3.
Yeah, because I am an introvert. So I am also like, when my husband starts conversations with like random people, I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing here?
Yeah.
But this is like, even for an introvert, this is like a context in which it can be easier to connect with other people. Yeah. Anyway, so I'll go quickly because I know we're running out of time.
You're fine.
But the next one is declaring yourself an emotionally sovereign state, is what I call it. So emotional sovereignty is best defined by this example. You made me feel jealous last night when I saw you dancing with that woman. Versus, when I saw you dancing with that woman last night, I felt jealous. So this is the idea that people can't make us feel any certain way. It's owning our own emotions and starting all these communication conversations with that idea that, hey, I'm having this emotion and I want to talk about it with you. I'm not here to blame you for it. And what I also like to say here is our partners are not always off the hook. Maybe they're actually doing something that they know hurts.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's starting from the place of, I'm feeling this way. Why? Why am I feeling this way? And then through that self-discovery, that's the emotional transparency piece, when you're really like having that conversation with yourself. Then when you decide, if you decide it's something you want to share with your partner, that's the emotional vulnerability piece. Yeah. Now I'm going to share this with you, and I don't know what your reaction is going to be, but this is my truth.
Love, love, love. Oh my God. Emotional intelligence. So important. So important.
The next chapter is love your partner, but love yourself a little bit more. And this is about the relationship with self, and that we are our best selves in relationship when we love ourselves.
Yeah. My whole life got better the moment that piece locked in for me. And I was like, oh, I'm not valuing myself. I'm not loving myself. I'm actually in my own way, and I have to like stop seeking that external validation and really do the inner work to love myself and be okay with my body and my past, and then I get to create my future. Yeah, I love this. Oh my God, I can't wait to read your book. Keep them coming.
Okay. Now the next one is about self-expression, and that is both using voice, like we talked about, and the sexual self-expression piece. They are very interlinked, actually. And it goes back to that, like from chapter 1, if you're going to create your own damn life, if you're going to figure out what you actually want, now you have to voice it. Yeah. We don't get everything we want, but if you don't voice it, you're for sure not getting it.
Yeah. I'm always telling people, if you don't ask, you don't know. Yeah. So always be willing to ask.
This is also where boundaries are coming out. Yeah. I know what I want and I know what I don't want. Mm-hmm. And I am going to let everybody know. Very, very important.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh, I love this.
The next one is the personal growth journey of your lifetime idea, which is we never stop growing. Yeah. And I think that's one thing about lifestyle or E&M, because so I have a podcast of my own, and my co-host and I joke all the time, if you really want to test your relationship, just add people. And so even with swingers that we're not like, having romantic relationships, we're constantly around new people, new situations all the time. And so it's acknowledging that all of these things are an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
And loving that to some degree. It doesn't always feel good. Personal growth does not always feel good.
No, it's messy, dirty, disgusting
Yes.
work. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And then the last chapter is about embracing pleasure.
Yeah.
I think this is another cultural misfortune that, especially American, is like all about productivity, and pleasure is almost like an afterthought. Then you add in all of the heavily religious messages we get about pleasure, and especially sexual pleasure. And this kind of almost goes back to chapter 1, whereas if you can start questioning this and embracing something else that feels good to you, that is your personal choice or personal truth of whatever that is. And I'm not even always talking about sex, I'm talking about any pleasures.
Yeah.
But it does extend to sex, especially because that gets so complicated with our many cultural messages that we grew up with, especially as women, but also men. And the beauty that can come out of just allowing that, because again, just like the sexual part of us is just part of us, enjoying pleasure of all types is just part of being human.
Yeah, definitely.
And that sexual shame especially gets carried into a lot of these, sexual and relationship conversations. So that just all kind of ties together.
I love it. How long have you been working on these 7 different concepts?
Well, I guess you could say for 6 years since we got into lifestyle. So here's the thing is like, I've always been into personal growth. I've always been into personal development. I became a coach for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had that in me already. Then, like taking this relationship to the gym thing has been a real eye opener for me. Like of all these things, like, oh, like that was really unhealthy. So I'm a people pleaser type and a lot of codependent tendencies. That was one of the first things that really came out. And we worked on, and I really worked on fixing. And I mean, you just work on that, and that alone is like voice and loving yourself and like,
yeah,
all the things kind of in one, your own self-worth, all these things. But, so I can't really say how long, a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what you were meant to do, right?
Yeah.
I think when you land in your purpose, it just flows, right? It just comes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, these are definitely all life lessons that became stronger for me within lifestyle. And these are also life lessons that everyone's learning all the time. I'm also a woman who's around 50, I will say. And, there's a wisdom and that we're all growing towards if we are open to that. And so, am I going to say it's all because I became non-monogamous? No, but that is the filter in which I learned a lot of these things, and it did push me harder in areas that I don't know how I would have gotten there otherwise. Maybe I would have, but it's been a fun way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So tell the listeners who hung on, they're hanging out with us still, what's the number one thing you want them to understand about E&M or relationships? Like what's the final thought here?
So I'm going to squeeze into one is just that really like relationship to self-peace and how important that is before we're talking about any other relationship. And then I would just say, I am not a person who is trying to convert the world into ethical non-monogamy. I don't think we should all be ethical non-monogamous in the same way that I don't think we should all be monogamous. I just want people to be open to hearing what it really is and not what they think it is. So maybe some understanding and also maybe some interest. I'm not an advocate for everyone becoming ethically non-monogamous. I'm an advocate for everyone knowing about it. And then when you choose monogamy, guess what? That's conscious choice. You just chose monogamy consciously rather than doing it because it's the only thing you've ever known.
Right. Yeah. Being a conscious chooser, which I always feel funny saying conscious chooser, but I think that's where like you take your power back, where you're like, oh, I'm actually get to participate because I'm going to consciously choose the way that I'm living.
Yes.
And yeah, I think more people should be open to just hearing. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to label it good or bad, but just understanding that there's multiple ways in which we can live, and we can actually all get along, because if we allow each other the freedom to be our authentic self, like if I want to be my fullest expression, then I also want that for you and everyone else in the world, because I truly believe that them being their best self is what's best for the world. And so if I really believe that, I should understand and accept all the different modalities that are out there about how you can live and be in the world. So
absolutely,
I'm here for it. Yeah, I think it's great. So Lauren, where do you hang out most? Where can people connect with you?
Probably the best place is at my website, which is swinginglifestylecoach.com, and signing up for my newsletter. Like as I said, the book will be coming out at the end of the year. The title will have something about 7 love and life lessons from a non-monogamous, but that's not completely landed yet. But if you want to follow me for the book or just some of these messages, and I have a lot of educational stuff on my website, you can go there. That's probably the best place. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook with the same name, Swinging Lifestyle Coach.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you so much, Lauren, for taking the time to have this conversation. And thank you to all the listeners who hung out with us. And we'll see you at the next conversation.